I have a lot of FOMO right now because I'm not in the studio with Spencer and our guest, journalist and author of The Public Substack, Michael Shellenberger. Welcome, Michael. What were
Good to be with
you doing today on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, I was testifying on the issue of AI procurement, but Senator Paul wanted me to testify about the role of AI in censorship. And so I spoke about the ways both in which AI has been used to censor people by the social media platforms, but also the way in which AI has been hyped, particularly deep fakes, as a way to create, we think, a predicate or a pretext for more censorship. And that was one of the things I wanted to raise the alarm about. In the process of doing the research, we discovered yet another important organization in the censorship industrial complex called the Deep Trust Alliance, playing on this idea of a deep fake, once again populated by folks that appear to have close ties with the intelligence and security organizations. So happy to be here and sort of continue to raise the alarm about the continued existence of the censorship apparatus.
And you keep talking about how there have been some victories for unveiling and sort of revealing how this censorship state works and sort of tying the hands of the federal government in some cases. But then it seems like anytime there's a win, you uncover something new where it's like, okay, there's another organization that's doing this. What do these recent wins mean? And is there reason to be hopeful that they can actually sort of be bound into what they can do to censor Americans?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge win in that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just ruled in favor of Missouri versus Biden, arguing that, in fact, the Biden White House had engaged in coercive measures to demand censorship from the social media platforms. It was a really strong ruling. I personally don't think it went far enough. There was part of it that they actually said that it didn't appear to be a violation, that this Department of Homeland Security agency called CISA had massively flagged a number of posts. They left that out because they couldn't find direct coercion. But there were other things that I worry about. I mean, one of the things that we discovered in the Facebook files was that the Facebook agreed to more censorship than they wanted to do, and they worried about the loss of the so-called data flows, which was the data they need to bring back from Europe, and they were worried about not getting support from the White House for that. So it's always, I think it is two steps forward, one step back. Also, we've seen some things at Twitter that have given us concern, but also Elon stepping in once again on the side of free speech. So it's definitely got a knife fight in a phone booth quality to it.
So, Michael, I think it's been a common theme that whenever we talk about tech on the floor of Congress, they really show their inability to understand tech or just refusal to do some research before they have to question someone who comes in as an expert. What was your sense of the members of Congress today and their understanding and grasp of AI?
Well, I mean, to be fair, AI is incredibly complex. And in fact, the CEO of Google, you may recall, told 60 Minutes that they don't understand often what AI is doing. So you're actually at a place where actually the technology has outpaced the technologists. At the same time, I worry a little bit about this idea that somehow AI is out of control, or that the only thing that we need to worry about is the existential risks of AI. I think there's much more mundane or prosaic risks that we need to be worried about. The use of AI to engage in mass censorship, but then also, as I say on the flip side, hyping AI to demand censorship is, I think, another problem. The hearing itself, in some ways, we didn't have the fireworks because I think in part the Democrats learned from when they were really beating up on Matt Taibbi and me back in March that it was better to just not engage at all. So on the one hand, you had I was engaged with some of the senators on these issues of censorship, but then the other folks on the panel were focused on more process concerns around how to exercise oversight around government procurement of AI, but not really getting into the core issue, which is, are we going to be using AI to facilitate censorship by the social media platforms? I pointed out that really for decades, the Defense Department, through DARPA, which is, of course, its R&D funder, part of DoD, that they had actually been funding all the work on deep fakes. So this, the alarmism around like deep fakes, or that somehow it's going to have some impact on the elections. We're the most prepared country in the world for it. Our government has funded the work on deep fakes. It's also funded the work on deep fake detection. And so it's a very interesting experience because, of course, we know from the research on COVID and the coronavirus that on the one hand, if you're going to be able to create vaccines, you also have to create the viruses. So and you see a similar case here with deepfake, where they need to create the deep fakes in order to create the deep fake detection. And it raises questions around whether or not the Defense Department is using or intends to use deep fakes in an offensive strategy. perhaps abroad, hopefully not domestically, but really with some amount of oversight, because obviously we all see the ways in which deepfakes are getting better and AI is making progress, and we don't have a complete understanding of it. And so it's one of these, I think it is fraught, and there's two sides of it, which is that on the one hand, we do want to enable the technology. It's an amazing technology. Many of us use AI in our day-to-day as a writer, we use it, Grammarly, Descript, various AI programs. On the other hand, we do worry that if it doesn't have the proper oversight, it could be abused. And then we also worry that the alarmism around the deepfakes and the AI can be abused.
And I think you're right to say that this is a very fraught situation because there's so much, like you said, that people just don't understand, whether it's lawmakers or the general public. Yeah. We've seen a lot of issues when it comes to regulation around big tech already. So how do you think Congress is equipped to come up with the right potential package? Should there be any regulation on AI? Is Congress equipped to actually make those decisions to come up with something that will safeguard us? Or is this a situation where we just can't trust the government, again, to keep us safe or to do the right thing?
I mean, my interest has been really on the issue of AI and social media for censorship. There's a whole other world of AI for other applications, which I am not expert on. I wouldn't profess to be. But for me, I think what really matters here is the conversation around what are we doing with social media platforms. And for the longest time, the debate has been around whether or not the government should demand social media platforms to censor more, with Democrats basically taking the position that they should censor more so-called misinformation, Republicans saying they shouldn't do as much. My view is that that really needs to change. And really what needs to happen is that if we're going to give Section 230 liability protections, which is the law that really allows Twitter and Facebook to have these monopolies, if they're going to have Section 230, then we should simply require that the users decide on their own content moderation, or what we might call censorship. In other words, when you sign up for Twitter or for Facebook, there will be drop-down menus. You can choose the filters you'd like to have. You could choose the filter from the Anti-Defamation League, the NCAA, and NAACP. You could choose it from the NRA or from the GOP. But it should be up to you to decide how you're going to filter your content. And there's been some objections to this sort of raised around, well, but the social media platforms are private companies, and that's true, and they do have a right to choose what content they want. But Section 230 is something that we give them. And so for me, I think it's kind of a new social media contract, so to speak, between users and citizens who have allowed these very powerful corporations to exist. And in exchange, I think we should be able to control the content and the recommendations made for us.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with the censorship around content moderation, especially. And I can also understand the folks that are concerned about their name, image, likeness, more so their image and likeness being used in these deep fake AIs, which are sometimes taking a scary direction. And I think many people just want rights over their image and likeness when it comes to the production of AI videos and such. Have you put any thought into what policies kind of satisfy both sides of it? So we don't have this overreach of censorship, but we also have some protections over our own personal information and data. And did any of those come up on the floor of Congress today?
It's funny. Those are super important questions, and naturally they did not come up in Congress. I do think that's a really essential question because, of course, on the one hand, you should control your own image and you should have rights to it, and that's in fact what as you know, the writer's strike in Hollywood is very much about that. But at the same time, I think we do allow for parody and for satire, and so for example, we allow editorial cartoonists to make parodies. Seems like the difference really is if you're trying to pass it off as a parody or as something genuine. And because we do want to, we have very strong First Amendment protections in the United States. We want to protect those. We want to protect the right for people to engage in parody and criticism. At the same time, I think if somebody is going to suggest that Michael Shellenberger said something that I didn't say or I don't believe, I think we can also agree that that's probably not right either. So I do think some of these issues are going to have to be worked out. But I think at least to start with, we should start with the principle that on social media platforms, users should decide how that content moderation is taking place. Because part of the reason I say this is that I think we all saw Elon opening up the X, formerly known as Twitter, the platform more, but then really the advertisers working with NGOs, some of whom have ties or funded by governments, demanding that advertisers not advertise on the platform and really trying to extract the demand out of Elon. that they will censor virality, basically saying you have freedom of speech but not freedom of reach. In fact, part of freedom of speech is freedom of reach. And we've now seen Elon take a more assertive posture, I would say, against ADL and CCDH and ISD, which are the organizations that have been leading the advertiser boycott. But it gives me concern that we could end up basically losing control of these social media platforms. They'd be controlled by some sort of, I think, unconstitutional marriage between government and NGOs. NGOs perhaps acting on behalf of governments, funded by governments, and really depriving us of our control over our own speech and over what we're able to hear from others.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us here today, talking about what you were here for and sharing your expertise with Congress, because they need all the help they can get to understand these important issues. Until next time, there will be more Rising right after this.